The city streets were cold and unforgiving, especially for those who had nowhere to call home. Every corner seemed to whisper stories of hardship and survival, and among them walked a young black girl, barely in her teens, but carrying a strength that belied her age. Her clothes were worn and patched, her shoes thin and cracked, but her eyes sparkled with a quiet determination. She had learned early that life didn't hand out kindness freely, yet she never let her struggles take away her humanity. Every morning, she would wake up under the old bridge where she slept on a thin, tattered blanket, shivering against the biting wind. The sounds of the city were harsh, the honking of cars, the shouting of vendors, and the footsteps of people rushing past without even noticing her. Yet, somehow, she had learned to move with the rhythm of the streets, to find little bits of warmth in discarded cardboard boxes, and to make friends with the stray animals that roamed nearby. They understood her loneliness in a way most humans didn't. Food was always scarce, and each day became a careful calculation of where she could find scraps, some kind strangers' leftovers, or coins dropped near the corner store. Hunger was a constant companion, but she refused to let it harden her heart. She would often share the little she found with the other homeless children, because she believed that sharing, even when you have nothing, was a kind of quiet magic that made life a little brighter. Despite the hardships, there was something remarkable about her spirit. She noticed things others ignored: the way a flower pushed through a crack in the pavement, the laughter of children playing in the distance, the kindness of a stranger who gave her a warm smile. These small moments reminded her that the world wasn't entirely cruel, and they gave her hope that life could change in an instant. Her days were filled with scavenging, small jobs, and dodging trouble. The city was not forgiving to someone like her, and dangers lurked around every corner, but she had a courage that surprised even herself. She learned how to read people quickly, to avoid those who meant harm, and to trust the rare ones who showed genuine care. She had grown wise beyond her years, not because she had books or teachers, but because the streets themselves were her classroom, teaching lessons in resilience, observation, and survival. At night, when the city lights flickered and the streets grew quiet, she would lie under her thin blanket and think about a life beyond the cold concrete. She dreamed of safety, warmth, and a home where she wouldn't have to fight for every meal. Her imagination became a place of refuge, a small sanctuary where she could be free from the harshness of reality. She imagined walking through fields, laughing with friends, and feeling the sun on her face without fear. These dreams kept her heart alive and her spirit unbroken. Even though she was young, she had faced more challenges than most adults could imagine, yet she carried herself with dignity, never begging aggressively or crying for pity. She walked with her head held high, because deep down she believed that her actions, no matter how small, could make a difference. In her mind, kindness was more powerful than fear, and hope was stronger than despair. Every day was a test, but she was determined to pass it with courage and grace. People often walked past her without a second glance, absorbed in their own lives, oblivious to the struggles of someone just a few steps away, but she didn't let their indifference affect her. She learned to survive quietly, observing, learning, and moving forward with resilience. The streets had shaped her, but they had not broken her. And this delicate balance of vulnerability and strength made her a remarkable young girl in a world that often ignored people like her. In her eyes, there was a mix of sadness and hope, a silent promise that one day, things would change. She carried stories of hardship in her heart, but also a belief that small acts of courage could change the world. It was on these very streets, under the harsh lights and cold winds, that she would soon face a moment that would test everything she believed in, and that act of bravery would set into motion a chain of events no one could have predicted. Even as she moved through the crowded streets, unnoticed by most, there was a quiet power about her, a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes, and sometimes, the strongest people are those who survive with nothing but hope and a kind heart. Little did she know, her life was about to intersect with someone whose world was the complete opposite of hers. And the moment of meeting would not only change her life but also remind the world that courage and kindness can be found in the most unexpected places. The morning was gray and damp, and the city seemed slower than usual, as if it too had sensed something unusual was about to happen. The homeless girl had already begun her daily routine, walking along the narrow alleyways where the smell of damp concrete mixed with the faint aroma of street food. She carried a small, worn backpack with her few possessions, a tattered notebook, a half-eaten sandwich, and a small blanket that had seen better days. Each step she took was careful, avoiding broken glass and puddles that reflected the pale sky above. As she turned a corner near the edge of the busy street, she noticed a figure slumped against the wall, partially hidden behind a newspaper stand. At first, she thought it was another homeless man asleep, but something about the way he lay made her pause. His breathing was uneven, shallow, and strained, and his face was pale, almost gray. A sudden sense of urgency gripped her chest, and without thinking, she ran closer, her heart pounding. "Sir. Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice trembling just slightly. The man did not respond, and she could see a faint tremor in his hands. It was clear he needed help immediately, but the streets were crowded, and most people were too busy to notice someone in need. Panic threatened to take over her mind, but she pushed it aside, remembering the lessons the streets had taught her about courage and quick thinking. She quickly scanned the area, looking for a phone or anyone nearby who could assist. There was a convenience store across the street, and a few pedestrians were walking past, distracted by their own lives. She shouted, "Please, someone call an ambulance," but her voice was almost swallowed by the city noise. No one stopped, and it became clear that if she wanted to save this man, she had to act fast herself. Without hesitation, she knelt beside him, checking for a pulse, and to her relief, she could feel a faint heartbeat. It was weak, but it was there. Her small hands were trembling, but her determination overpowered the fear coursing through her veins. She grabbed a cloth from her bag and tried to wipe the sweat and grime from his face, hoping to make him more comfortable. Every second felt like an hour, and every passing moment weighed heavily on her. She remembered seeing the emergency number posted on a nearby wall in her neighborhood, and with shaking hands, she fumbled to dial. "Please, hurry. A man is dying," she cried into the phone, giving the location as best as she could. As she spoke, she stayed on the ground with him, whispering reassurances even though she wasn't sure if he could hear her. "You're going to be okay. Help is on the way," she murmured, though her own heart raced with fear. Minutes felt like eternity, and her mind raced with memories of all the times she had felt powerless on these streets. But today, she refused to be powerless. Today, she could make a difference. The man's breathing grew more labored, and she could see his hands shaking violently, but she stayed with him, holding his hand, telling him stories about small, happy things to calm him, things about the pigeons she often fed, the little stray cat that followed her, anything to distract him from the pain. Finally, she heard the distant wail of sirens, growing louder with each second. Relief flooded her like a sudden wave, but she didn't move, staying by his side until the paramedics arrived. "We've got him," one of them said as they carefully lifted him onto the stretcher. "He's lucky you were here," another added, glancing at her with a mix of surprise and respect. She stood back, her heart still racing, as they wheeled him away. She didn't even know his name, or anything about him, but she knew she had done the right thing. She had acted when so many others walked by, and in that moment, she realized that courage wasn't about strength or size, it was about choosing to help when it mattered most. As the sirens faded into the distance, the girl continued her walk through the city streets, her backpack heavier now with relief rather than belongings. Her mind lingered on the man she had saved, wondering if he would be okay. Little did she know that this single act of bravery would soon connect her life to someone completely different from her world, someone whose wealth and power could change everything, and that this ordinary morning on the streets was about to turn into an extraordinary story. The ambulance had barely disappeared around the corner when the girl stood in the middle of the street, her heart still pounding. Her small hands trembled from adrenaline, and a strange mixture of fear and pride washed over her. She had never imagined that her morning would turn into something so urgent, something so important. She looked around, noticing the indifferent faces of people rushing by, most unaware of the drama that had just unfolded, and yet she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing she had acted when it mattered most. The city seemed louder now, the traffic horn blaring sharply as if applauding her courage, and the smell of hot coffee from a nearby cart reminded her that life went on, even in moments of crisis. She walked slowly, thinking about the man she had helped, wondering who he was and what his life was like. She realized that for him, today might have been his last day, and somehow, she had stepped in, without hesitation, to change that. Her thoughts drifted to her own life, to the constant struggle of sleeping on cold sidewalks, searching for food, and avoiding the dangers that lurked in every shadow. She had grown accustomed to surviving, but rarely had she felt the thrill of saving someone else's life. The act felt surreal, almost like a story she had read somewhere, yet it had happened to her, and she could still feel the weight of it in her chest. Hours later, she found herself near the park where she often rested, sitting on a worn bench and watching the pigeons peck at crumbs on the ground. Her mind replayed the scene over and over, the man's labored breathing, the urgency in her own voice. The moment she felt his weak hand squeeze hers, she realized something profound. Courage was not something you waited to feel, it was something you acted on, even when fear tried to stop you. As she sat quietly, a man in a sharp suit approached, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Excuse me, miss," he said gently, "did you happen to help a man near 5th Street this morning?" She looked up, startled by his sudden appearance, and nodded cautiously. "Yes, I think I did," she replied, unsure why a stranger would know. His eyes softened, and he knelt slightly to meet her gaze. "I am that man's friend. He wanted me to find you. He wanted to thank you personally," he said, and something in his voice made her heart skip a beat. She stared at him, confused and slightly skeptical. "Thank me," she whispered, her mind racing, "but I didn't do anything special. I just helped him." The man smiled warmly. "What you did was far more than just helping. You saved his life. Without you, he wouldn't be here." His words made her chest tighten, a mix of pride and disbelief washing over her. The girl didn't know it yet, but her small act of bravery had created ripples she could never have imagined. People often underestimated her because of her age, her appearance, or the fact that she had nothing, but today she had proven that true heroism didn't require wealth, status, or recognition. It only required a willing heart, and she had given that completely. As the afternoon sun broke through the gray clouds, casting long shadows across the park, she thought about the future, something she rarely allowed herself to consider. Could one act really change a life, hers or his? She had always dreamed of better days, but she had never imagined that her courage could intersect with someone else's destiny so dramatically. Later that day, she returned to her usual corner, carrying her small backpack and tattered blanket, but something felt different. Something intangible yet powerful lingered in the air, a sense of anticipation, as if the city itself had noticed her bravery. She had acted without thinking, driven purely by compassion, and now, in a way she couldn't yet understand, the world was responding. The man she had saved was a stranger, yes, but he was also a turning point, a chance for her life to shift in ways she had never dared to imagine. As night fell and the streetlights flickered on, illuminating the wet pavement, she lay down on her blanket with a sense of quiet hope, the events of the day replaying like a vivid dream. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, and she had emerged not only alive but empowered. Unbeknownst to her, the man's gratitude would soon take a form she had never expected, a form that would alter the course of her life completely. And as she drifted into a light sleep under the stars, the city hummed around her, carrying whispers of a story that was only just beginning, a story where courage, kindness, and destiny were about to collide in ways no one could have imagined. The next morning, the girl woke to the usual chill of the city streets, rubbing her arms for warmth as the wind sliced through her thin jacket. But something felt different, as if the world itself had shifted slightly. She had no idea that the events of yesterday would come back to her in a way she could never have imagined. The man she had helped, the one she barely knew, was about to cross the invisible line between their worlds, a line most people never even noticed. She went about her usual routine, moving carefully through the bustling streets, avoiding puddles and piles of trash. When she reached the corner where she often begged for food or spare coins, a sleek black car pulled up and stopped beside her, its engine humming softly. Her heart skipped a beat, and a knot of unease formed in her stomach. She wasn't sure what to expect, but instinct told her that something extraordinary was about to happen. A man in a crisp suit stepped out of the car, his polished shoes clicking against the wet pavement. He smiled gently, and there was a kindness in his eyes that immediately put her at ease. "Are you the young lady who helped someone near 5th Street yesterday?" he asked, his voice calm yet firm. She hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. "Yes. I think that was me," she replied softly, clutching her small backpack tighter. The man nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. handing it to her with a steady hand. "I am the man you saved. Yesterday, you didn't just help me, you saved my life," he said, and she stared at him, her eyes widening. "Saved your life?" she whispered, disbelief washing over her. Her mind struggled to process what he was saying, how someone so important could owe his survival to her, a homeless girl who spent her nights on the cold streets. "Yes," he continued, crouching slightly to meet her gaze, "I am a businessman, a millionaire, but none of that matters right now. What matters is you, and what you did." His words sank into her heart slowly, a mixture of shock, awe, and gratitude swelling inside her. She had never imagined that a single act of kindness, something she had done without thinking, without expecting anything in return, could carry such weight. For a moment, the girl simply stared, unsure of how to respond. The man smiled, as if understanding her hesitation. "I know life has been difficult for you, and I cannot change your past," he said, "but I can help you now, in whatever way you need." She felt a lump form in her throat, tears threatening to spill. The city had always been harsh, indifferent, even cruel, but here was someone offering not pity, not judgment, but genuine help. He explained that he had been traveling for business when he collapsed on the street, unaware of how serious his condition had been. The paramedics had stabilized him, but it was her quick thinking and bravery that ultimately saved his life. "Most people would have walked past," he said softly, "but not you. You saw someone in need, and you acted. That is rare, and that is remarkable." Her chest swelled with pride, though she tried to hide it behind her usual quiet demeanor. The man paused, watching her carefully, as if measuring the moment. "I want to offer you a chance to change your life," he said finally. "I cannot undo the struggles you faced, but I can give you a new start, a place to live, education, opportunities to build the life you deserve." The girl felt her breath catch in her throat, the enormity of his words sinking in. For years, she had dreamed of safety, warmth, and hope, but she had never believed it could come so suddenly. She looked at him, a mixture of awe and caution in her eyes. "Why me?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. "Why would you care about someone like me?" He smiled gently. "Because you reminded me what humanity really means, and you deserve a chance, just like anyone else." The city seemed to fade around them, the honking cars and busy pedestrians blurring into the background, leaving only this moment, a quiet miracle amidst the chaos. As the girl took in what he was offering, something inside her shifted, a spark of hope igniting after years of darkness. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that life could be different, that courage and kindness could indeed open doors she had never dared to approach. And though she didn't know what the future held, she knew one thing clearly: her life, and his, had been changed forever by a single act of compassion. The girl's eyes widened as the man continued speaking, his words echoing in her mind like something out of a dream. She had never imagined that someone from her world, so polished, so different, would recognize her courage and offer more than just gratitude. His presence was overwhelming yet comforting, and she felt a strange mixture of fear, awe, and disbelief. She fidgeted with the straps of her worn backpack, unsure how to respond, unsure if this was real. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded note, handing it to her gently. "I wanted to say this properly," he said, "but words on paper sometimes make more sense than spoken ones." She unfolded it carefully, and her eyes scanned the neat handwriting, a simple message filled with appreciation. "You showed me that humanity is alive, that courage can come from anyone, anywhere. I will never forget you." Her heart pounded as she clutched the note to her chest, feeling warmth she had rarely experienced. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to smile, a small, shy smile, and the man noticed. His eyes softened, and he took a step closer. "I know life hasn't been easy for you," he said, "and I know you're used to fending for yourself, but you don't have to do that anymore. Not alone, not ever." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten, tears threatening to spill. She had spent so long surviving in a world that ignored her, yet here was someone acknowledging her worth in a way she had never imagined. She glanced down at the city streets, bustling with people who would never notice her again, unaware that she had just changed someone's life, and realized that yesterday's act was not just about saving a man, it had also revealed her own strength, her bravery. Something she had once taken for granted, had now become a bridge between two very different worlds, and the enormity of that truth left her breathless. The man continued, "I know this may feel strange, or even unfair," he said gently, "but you need to understand that your kindness and courage matter more than money or status. You saved my life, and I want to give you something that can help you build your own." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "I want to help you with school, with a safe place to stay, and opportunities you've never had. You deserve a chance to grow, to live without fear." The girl's mind raced as she tried to absorb his words. Images of cold nights on the sidewalk, empty stomachs, and lonely streets flickered through her mind, and yet, for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine warmth, comfort, and hope. She pictured a small room with a real bed, books to read, food to eat, and people who cared about her well-being, and the thought made her chest ache with longing and anticipation. I don't know what to say," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. The man shook his head with a gentle smile. "You don't need to say anything. You've already said everything that matters, with your actions. That is enough." More than enough. She looked at him, studying his face, the kindness in his eyes, and realized that this man's gratitude was not just words, it was real, and it carried power, a power that could transform her life in ways she had never dreamed possible. The moment stretched, quiet yet heavy with meaning, as she tried to process the surreal turn her life had taken. From a street filled with danger and neglect to a conversation with someone who valued her, she felt like she had stepped into another world, a world where courage, compassion, and humanity could create miracles, and where her small act of bravery had blossomed into something extraordinary. Finally, she nodded slowly, a mix of determination and hope shining in her eyes. I want to try," she whispered. "I want to learn, to change, to live." The man's smile widened, and he extended his hand, not as a businessman to a stranger, but as a human acknowledging another human's worth. "Then let's begin," he said, and in that handshake, an unspoken promise passed between them, a promise that life could indeed be different. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the streets, the girl felt something shift inside her, a spark of hope, a feeling she had long thought impossible. For the first time, she realized that courage and kindness could lead to gratitude, friendship, and new beginnings, and that the world, despite all its harshness, still held moments of wonder, miracles waiting to unfold for those brave enough to act. The next few days passed in a blur for the girl. Her life had always been predictable in its unpredictability: wake up cold, scavenge for food, avoid trouble. But now, everything felt different, as if the world had shifted just enough to give her a glimpse of something bigger. The man she had saved had promised to help her, and though she didn't fully understand what that would mean, a sense of cautious hope began to grow in her chest. It started with small gestures, the kind that felt almost magical to her. A warm meal appeared on her corner bench, left by a stranger who had heard of her bravery. A small notebook, filled with blank pages, appeared next to her blanket, with a note, "Dream big. Keep writing." She clutched it to her chest, overwhelmed by the kindness that seemed to follow her now. It was as though the universe had decided to acknowledge her courage, and the feeling made her heart race. Then came the call, the one that would change everything. The man asked her to meet him at a quiet cafe, away from the noise of the streets. She hesitated at first, unsure if she belonged in such a place, her worn shoes and patched clothes standing out against the polished tables and soft music. But curiosity and a spark of trust drove her forward, and she stepped inside, her eyes wide with awe at the world she had never known. He greeted her warmly, as if she had been expected, which, in a way, she had. "I want to make sure you have what you need to start a new chapter," he said, "a place to stay, education, opportunities to learn and grow. You have shown courage and kindness that most adults never achieve, and you deserve a chance to flourish." His words were simple, yet they carried weight, more than anything she had ever heard. She felt a lump in her throat, trying to comprehend how a single act could lead to such generosity. She had helped someone out of instinct, because it was the right thing to do, and now, the ripple of that act was reaching far beyond what she could imagine. For the first time, she realized that courage and kindness were not invisible. They could create opportunities, open doors, and change destinies. The man explained the plan carefully, wanting her to feel comfortable. "I've arranged a small apartment for you, safe and warm, a place where you can rest and focus on your future," he said, "and I want you to attend school, or any program you feel passionate about, so you can discover what you're capable of." The words felt surreal, her mind spinning as she imagined a life with stability, safety, and possibilities. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had held the dying man just days ago, and realized that those same hands would now hold a pen, textbooks, or tools to build her dreams. She could hardly believe that her life, once confined to the cold streets and constant struggle, was now filled with potential, opportunity, and hope. He smiled, sensing her wonder and hesitation. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said softly, "and I don't expect you to understand everything right now. You only need to take the first step, and we'll go from there together." The offer was not just about money, or shelter, or education. It was about trust, and the recognition that her courage had value far beyond what she had ever imagined. As they walked together toward the car that would take her to her new apartment, she noticed the city differently. The same streets that had seemed cold and harsh now felt alive with possibility, and even the people rushing past seemed less intimidating, as if they, too, were part of a world where miracles could happen. By the time they arrived, she was standing in front of a small, cozy apartment with clean windows and soft light spilling onto the sidewalk. She stepped inside and was greeted by warmth, both physical and emotional. The walls were plain, yet welcoming, a blank canvas for her to fill with hope and dreams, and she realized that for the first time in her life, she had a place to call her own. She sat on the edge of the bed, the reality settling in, and allowed herself to breathe fully for the first time in years. This was more than just a new home, it was a symbol of possibility, a chance to rewrite her story, to live beyond survival and step into a life where courage, compassion, and hope mattered, and she knew, deep in her heart, that her journey had only just begun. The act that had started it all, simple yet profound, had set into motion a future she could have never imagined. The first morning in her new apartment felt like stepping into a dream, sunlight spilling softly across the small, cozy room, illuminating the bare walls that seemed to whisper possibilities. She stretched, feeling warmth in her bones for the first time in years, and for a moment, she simply breathed, letting the quiet calm replace the constant tension she had carried on the streets. Her backpack, once filled with scraps and memories of survival, now rested empty in the corner, a symbol of a life she had left behind. She explored the apartment slowly, running her fingers along the smooth surfaces of the tables and counters, marveling at the simple luxury of clean floors, running water, and a bed that didn't feel like cardboard. It was hard to believe that all of this could belong to her, that someone had entrusted her with a chance at a life she had only dreamed of in fleeting moments of imagination. The man who had saved him, her unlikely benefactor, arrived soon after, bringing with him folders filled with school options, programs, and plans for her future. He spoke gently, making sure she understood each choice, letting her know that she had the freedom to decide, that her voice mattered, and that her dreams, however small or grand, were valid. She listened carefully, her heart racing, the world she had known shrinking behind her while a new world unfolded in front. Her first week was filled with new routines, each moment a lesson in trust and adjustment. She learned to navigate the neighborhood, use the bus, and even order food from a cafe without fear. Small victories, like successfully making breakfast on her own, or helping a neighbor carry groceries, felt monumental compared to her old life. Every step forward reminded her that courage and persistence were powerful tools, and that her bravery on the street had not been wasted. School was a revelation. Unlike anything she had imagined, the classrooms were warm and filled with books, teachers spoke with patience and care, and for the first time, she could imagine a future that stretched beyond mere survival. She absorbed every lesson with a hunger that went beyond academics, learning not just words and numbers, but how to dream, how to plan, and how to believe that her efforts could create real change. Evenings became a time of reflection, as she sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker, thinking about the man she had saved, and about the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. She realized that her life had transformed not because of luck alone, but because of courage, because she had acted when it mattered, and because someone had seen her worth. She began to understand the power of her actions, and how one brave moment could ripple out to touch countless lives. The girl also found herself helping others in small ways, just as she had always done. She donated books she received to children in the shelters, tutored younger kids struggling with schoolwork, and shared stories of hope with those who felt invisible. She had learned that kindness wasn't just a gift, it was contagious, and the more she gave, the more she realized how strong and capable she truly was. Her transformation was not just external, it was internal as well. She no longer saw herself as a victim of circumstance but as a young girl with agency, strength, and potential. Each challenge she faced now, whether learning a new subject, navigating social situations, or building confidence, became an opportunity to grow. She was discovering a version of herself she had never known. A girl who could face the world with determination and hope. By the end of her first month, she stood in the small apartment, looking out over the streets she once wandered with caution and fear, and smiled. A sense of pride washed over her, not because of wealth or comfort, but because she had survived, adapted, and thrived. She had turned fear into courage, poverty into purpose, and small acts of kindness into life-changing moments. The city that had once seemed harsh and unyielding now appeared full of possibility, and she was ready to meet it head-on. For the first time in her life, she understood something essential: that transformation wasn't given, it was nurtured. That courage, kindness, and opportunity, when combined, could reshape destinies, and that the moment she had chosen to act on the street, saving a stranger's life, had become the key to unlocking her own future. She had stepped into a new chapter, a life full of hope, promise, and the chance to inspire others just as she had been inspired. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, but the girl never forgot where she had come from. Each morning, as sunlight streamed through her clean window, she remembered the cold sidewalks, the hunger, and the nights spent shivering under tattered blankets. Yet now, those memories were no longer chains. They were reminders of her strength, of the courage that had carried her through every hardship, and of the kindness that had changed her life forever. She often thought about the man whose life she had saved, the stranger who had become the bridge to her new beginning. His gratitude had been genuine, but what stayed with her most was the way he had believed in her worth when the world had often ignored her. That belief had become a foundation on which she could build her future, teaching her that sometimes, the smallest act of courage could ripple outward, touching lives in ways one could never predict. One crisp morning, she returned to the street she had once called home, though this time it was different. She walked slowly, taking in the familiar sights, the broken pavement, the alleyways, the discarded wrappers and cardboard boxes, but she did not feel fear or despair. She felt gratitude, and a quiet desire to give back. She noticed a young boy huddled near a cold fire, shivering, his clothes torn and dirty, and she paused. Her heart tightening, she remembered how it felt to be invisible. To wonder if anyone would care. Without hesitation, she approached him, offering a warm blanket she had packed in her bag and a small snack she had prepared. The boy looked up, startled, his eyes wide and wary, but as she smiled and spoke softly, explaining that he was not alone, something in him relaxed. The girl realized in that moment that the courage that had saved a stranger's life could also bring hope to someone else. That courage, combined with compassion, was a force more powerful than she had ever imagined. She spent the day with the boy, helping him find a safe place to stay, giving him small guidance on how to navigate the streets, and sharing stories of hope and resilience. The boy listened closely, absorbing every word, and for the first time, she saw a spark of belief in his eyes, a spark she remembered seeing in herself. That day, she understood that her journey was no longer just about survival or her own success. It was about creating a ripple of kindness that could extend far beyond her, touching lives she had never met. Back in her apartment that evening, she reflected on how drastically life had changed. The same streets that had once been harsh and unforgiving now felt like a distant memory, tempered by the lessons she had learned, the courage she had shown, the compassion she had offered, and the opportunities she had received had all intertwined to create a new reality, one where hope and determination could coexist with kindness and generosity. She thought about the man who had saved her from a life of struggle, realizing that their encounter had been more than chance. It had been a collision of fates, a moment where human goodness met human bravery, and together, they had sparked a change that neither could have accomplished alone. That realization made her heart swell with gratitude, not just for him, but for the universe that had given her the courage to act, the strength to endure, and the chance to transform her own destiny. As the weeks passed, she continued to grow, learning new skills, attending school, and helping others along the way. Her story began to inspire people far beyond her neighborhood, spreading through whispers, then social media, then news articles. A homeless girl who had acted selflessly and courageously had changed the life of a millionaire, and in turn, had changed her own life forever. The world had taken notice, not for wealth or fame, but for the undeniable proof that kindness and courage could rewrite destinies. One quiet evening, she stood by the window of her apartment, looking out over the city that had once been cold and intimidating, and she smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment and hope. She had lived through fear, poverty, and uncertainty, and yet she had emerged stronger, braver, and more compassionate than she had ever known. The journey had taught her that true courage was not measured in grand gestures or titles, but in small acts of humanity, repeated and multiplied through connection and care. Her life, once confined to survival, had become a story of transformation, resilience, and the enduring power of kindness, and as she watched the lights of the city twinkle, she understood the greatest truth of all: one brave act, one choice to help, one spark of compassion, could create ripples that changed not only a single life, but the lives of countless others, including her own. And in that moment, she knew that her journey was only beginning, and that hope, courage, and kindness would continue to guide her, wherever life might lead.